Hello and welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a sometimes funny and we're trying to be smart podcast covering all things new and classic Trek. I'm your current acting captain, Myrriah Gossett. With me on the view screen, we have
Jessie. Hello. Hi. Jessie Gender is my name. And YouTube's my game? Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm gonna pass it to Erin.
No, that's perfect. We love that on this podcast. Nothing better than either a bad pun or a fumbled introduction.
Oh, well, then you are going to love me because that's basically 90% of my personality.
Perfect. And
I am Erin. Erin is my name and science is my game.
Yes. Already off to a perfect start. Tonight we're just going to have a good old-fashioned nerdy little hangout. We're going to talk about some Star Trek. We're going to talk about what else we're watching and enjoying right now in our little gap of time here. We're also going to get into some really cool projects that Jessie and Erin are working on. And of course, I know I have some questions from our listeners and live stream watchers for Erin about some science questions in regards to Star Trek. So we shall see what we get into, but just a couple of reminders. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. You should also tell your friends about it, and you should subscribe on YouTube so that you can watch the live streams. All the links and everything are at StarTrekPod.co. And if you are watching us live tonight, pop those questions in the chat. You can use capital P-O-D, capital pod in the chat so that we can kind of note that that is a question for us. And not just y'all chit-chatting with each other, which we also encourage you to do. So, Erin, I know you've been on the pod before, but I thought we would start with Jessie. I have a couple of questions I love asking everyone when they come on the pod. And the first is, what was your gateway into Star Trek?
I adore answering this question because I still don't think anyone's beaten me, and I think I've claimed the weirdest entry to Trek. Erin, I don't even know if you've heard this story.
I don't know if I've heard this story. I'm very excited now.
I think I have the weirdest one, and that's because my parents used to be, well, they are divorced, and so on weekends I would have to drive an hour to my dad's house, so he would come and pick me up, and they meet somewhere in the middle, and he'd always like play something on the way back to his house. Because we just didn't talk because it was always Friday and we were tired. So one week he came in and had the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook. And he just listened to the audiobook for Star Trek Nemesis, and that stuff had like sound effects and music. And so I listened the hell out of that. I like stole it from him. I think I still have it. It was a library loan. So I think I still have the library version of the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook.
Sorry, local public library.
Yeah, apologies. My aunt who's a librarian will come after me, will hunt me. There's a lone librarian. It's like what's that movie where it's just it follows? There's like a librarian just slowly coming towards me, coming at me.
Constantly in the shadows. You don't even know. I mean, Jessie, I think there might be someone behind you right
now. But yeah, so he played that, and then it gets better. So I love the crap out of that, and my dad saw that I loved the crap out of that audiobook. And it's Nemesis, right? So it's like the last movie. It's like the end of their journey. And it's also not great. So it's like this weird, like I have no idea what's happening, but it's emotional. I love it. Don't know who Shinzon is, but I'm sure he's a great guy. And then he bought me to like continue my Star Trek journey, season 7 of Star Trek: The Next Generation on DVD. So that starts me off at Descent Part 2. Which is Next Generation. You can really watch any episode out of order as you want because that show is like very episodic, except for I think that episode particularly because it's like it's got Hugh, it's got the Borg, it's got lore. It's a part 2. So I just watched. I'm like, this is wonderful. I have no idea what's happening, and it was wonderful. So that's how I got into Star Trek, and then I started watching Star Trek Enterprise because that was the one that was week to week when I was a kid. So that's where I went. So yeah, it was I think the weirdest way into Star Trek, and I sort of backed into the good stuff.
Oh my gosh, that is so incredible. The other question I like asking folks is, what is your current favorite Trek memory? Because that's not always like how you got into Star Trek, but I always like knowing a current favorite Trek memory.
I mean, my current favorite one, I think, is just probably Mission Chicago, which is where I think I physically met Erin for the first time. But like that that whole time at Miss Chicago was like the first time I got to be completely surrounded by Trekkies. Like I've met Trekkies here and there throughout my life, but you know, it was always fairly online or just like one-off people here and there. That was the first time where I got to be surrounded by just Trekkies. And it was an absolute joy, and I had so much fun. Kind of got overwhelmed because I got to meet like some people who I've looked up to for such a long time, and then some of them happen to know me from my own YouTube channel, which is way too much. I could not handle that at all. So yeah, so it was that I think is my favorite memory, because it was just I don't think I've ever experienced something so like fun and joyous than that, at least in the recent past. So
That was a great weekend.
yeah, really.
Yeah.
I still haven't done a con yet. That's like been on my list for a while. And I work in like like the documentary space mostly in podcasting. And so my schedule is always just like really crazy. And it's always people being like, are you going to go? Are you going to go? And I'm just like, probably not.
I'm so upset. I'm so upset because they were supposed to have in Seattle, which is where I live currently, and I was like, no. Then they canceled it for whatever reason. But it was just like I was like, no, I wanted that. It was right here. It was so close, and it slipped through my fingers.
I know. I was also very sad. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest and from British Columbia. So I was just like, oh, I could like twofer. I could like go to this thing and then go see family. May's usually a little bit of a slower time, but sad face.
Alas.
Denied.
Denied. Request denied. And then I have a question for both of you that I wanted to ask, which is, if you could be a member of any culture or species from Star Trek and you would appear as that on the show. I know, Erin, you've already been technically on the show. But like...
As a boring human.
I guess
dull.
We assume.
Yeah, we assume. I didn't see any weird nose ridges or anything.
No.
Yeah. no fun things. But if you could appear as anyone any kind of person, who would you want to be on a Trek show?
I mean, I love I don't know if I want to be a Klingon. I also don't
like go through the prosthetics of it.
But I also don't want to like culturally appropriate Klingons. But like, I feel like the Jadzia Dax tangential association with Klingons is like a perfect line. So maybe
a Trill who's been a Klingon in a past life.
Well, yeah, or like who had Klingon friends, or like maybe I'm just a human who has a ton of Klingon friends. Like, we hang out and do a lot of Klingon stuff together. Because there's something about that culture. I mean, I'm always drawn to it, right? It's like Ren Fair's got like Vikings and pirates, and like Klingons just kind of fall right into that. I'm like, those are the crowd I want to hang out with.
I could quite literally see you just screaming, "Don't get between me and the blood wine!" I could literally see you yelling that.
Right?
Yeah.
Very fitting. What about you, Jessie?
Mine's an easy answer. I mean, I my second favorite species is Andorians, because I just love them so much, especially in books, because they have 4 genders, and that's just cool to me. But the easy answer for me is Trills. I just think Trills are cool. Yeah, just badass and get to have fun. And then also have a slightly messed up society that I can come and be like, no, stop that. Let's fix this up. None of your weird like judgy shit going on here and your weird mystical pools and nonsense. All right, let's fix that up. But yeah, no, I always, I mean, just because I'm drawn to Jadzia as a character, but also I like a culture that's like really about exploring identity. Like even in Star Trek Discovery, in the episode Forget Me Not, I think it was the name of the episode, was where we got to see the Trill homeworld there, and like seeing just how they explore identity and self in a really cool way. So that just resonates with me always. So yeah, Trill easily.
Yeah, I think I also really like the Trill. I'm also a person who's already covered in tattoos, so the idea that it's like something that's sort of just like automatically, a part of who you are. So I think that's really interesting, and the concept of being able to like learn from so many other potential cultures and people, and just like, I don't know, I think it's really cool to be able to develop all of that knowledge.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of those, like, we get to see little pieces of the Trill Society, but usually as it relates to symbiotes. And I'm always someone who's would love to like learn more about that culture sans that. Just to like see like what does this culture value when you have like these these people in your society that just have these ancestral memories. So like, what does it mean? What does it say to societies? Like, do they value ancestors? Do they value them less? What do they think about like oral histories and storytelling? Like, I think there's so many things you could explore with that culture that's only been hinted at that I just always would like love to explore in a really cool way.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, I think we have a couple of questions. I collected a few that deal with some science of Star Trek, and I'm sure some more will pop up in the chat. But one from MagMag, they asked a storyline that you were potentially most impressed with that matched actual science.
Ooh, like across
It was
Star Trek in general?
I think in general, yeah. It could be one maybe that you've worked on if that helps narrow it down, but anything in general,
No,
yeah.
I do have a story for that, and I'm gonna quickly look up the quote, and I'm so sorry.
I'll just say, I love it when they slingshot around the sun and it makes them time travel. I think that's total science. I believe that's science. I'll just answer the questions for you, Doc. I got this science stuff. I got it for you.
I appreciate that. That's all I'm looking for. No, the quote I'm looking up is from anyway, it was from the original series, and I believe it was an episode that aired in 67 or 68, and Captain Kirk talks about encountering a void in the like a dark void in space-time, I think is how he phrased it. That's why I was trying to get the exact language right. And what's interesting with that is that was the same year that the term black hole was coined.
Whoa.
Right. So it was
That's
like
cool.
we had like the physics of black holes had kind of been postulated, but no one had like coined that term and really started exploring it. And then literally like the same year that was established in scientific canon, like Kirk in dialogue came as close as we had ever seen to actually describing what a black hole was. He just never said the exact black hole. But yeah, like across all of Star Trek, that is my favorite. So close, like it's almost chicken and the egg, like what came first, because they were so in parallel of coming out that I love it.
That's so cool.
That is so amazing. Okay,
love sharing that fact. Yay.
Wizzy went back. Space fireworks, how do they work?
Did I text you this or I messaged you this when that episode airs? Like, how does that work?
So many people messaged me
this. I'm sorry if this is traumatic.
No, it's okay. I mean, one thing to make abundantly clear is I might be the science advisor for the entire Star Trek franchise, but that doesn't mean they come to me with stuff. and particularly in post-production. And I think like visually it looks cool, but there is an element of needing to oxidize the chemicals. Which requires an atmosphere.
I was like, maybe they're not even like really fireworks. What if it's like space lasers, like
So this is where we and the process, right? If they did come to me and they were like, we're gonna have fireworks, I would absolutely be like, okay, we can have, because there is like when ships, for example, explode, they do explode. Like there are flames, but that's because of the oxygen that's provided from the ship. And so like there are ways to have, it's just that they're short-lived. It's going to quickly burn out. And so you would want to find ways to like sustain reactions. So if you're able to have like a sustainable chemical reaction that didn't require oxygen, I would have to think more about that. To be honest, I haven't, because I was just like, oh God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I mean, I'll just say it looked very pretty. I was just like, ooh,
great.
Pretty lights.
Cool.
The graphics team and post-production and special effects, everyone did a really great job.
It looked awesome. So yeah, on behalf of science, haven't quite figured it out yet, but it's a good motivation for me to actually come up with a real answer for that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so much in Star Trek that, cannot be explained by science. And now we have these things, things like the iPads, iPhones, talking to a computer, we had to figure all this out eventually.
Exactly.
One day we'll have space fireworks.
Exactly.
You can dream. I still my favorite thing with iPads though is like the still in TNG where they would have like a different pad for every book. So there's like a pile of pads on their desk. It's still my favorite thing.
It's like the amount of documents that a single pad, even back to like the OG e-readers,
Yeah.
you still would not need 8 to 10 pads.
I mean, the way Picard reads, I could believe it. He's just like, yeah, it just needs like Riker's just like, how many books are you reading, Jean-Luc? God dang.
That Kindle is full.
Exactly.
And then a question I had was, what was a puzzle that maybe the Picard team brought to you this season that you had the most fun sort of working on and figuring out?
Ooh, oh, that's a good question. Also, I just came up with a brilliant explanation for the number of pads that you have.
Ooh,
The
let's hear this.
analogy is tabs on a browser.
Oh.
That's why
Yeah.
you have dozens of pads, because they're in abundance. And yes, on a single web browser, I can look up anything I want, but it's much more convenient to have dozens of tabs open.
I get that. As someone who has like piles of books for my research, like I can't read online. I always have to buy the book. I can never do the ebook. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, in terms
Where
of
is my Reddit pad?
In terms of the Picard season 3, I think it was early on in the season. I'm trying to remember the exact language, where Seven was talking about the infiltration of the internal systems. Like they were, maybe Jessie or Myrriah can help me with this, but they picked up a type of gas that we picked from canon that like they had died from.
Oh, I vaguely
Oh
recall
yeah,
this.
when the changeling like puts Jack in the chamber.
Yeah.
And they're like, this gas is leaking, and they have to wear the face things.
Exactly. And like, I'm so sorry I don't remember the phrasing.
I don't
because
remember
did,
the
but
phrasing
it was
either.
a long time ago too. This is
Yeah, I
always
was like,
hard.
yeah.
It's always a fun adventure for me when the shows actually air, because I'm like,
You're like,
"Ooh, what
oh yeah, I
science did
forgot
use
about
for this?"
that.
Yeah.
What did I do? Yeah.
But I do remember with that one, like really going through canon and really trying to figure out like the exact systems and like how that would work and if that would be toxic but not necessarily kill people. And like, yeah, that was pretty fun. So that was a fun adventure I had.
Love that. Okay. We'll see if anything else pops up in the chat. But for now, I wanted to talk a little bit about one of my favorite things about Star Trek and sci-fi in general, and I think this will tie into our conversation later about the project y'all are working on, is just like the ability for sci-fi to sort of reflect the values and provide commentary on like the space that we exist in currently. And I think that's one of the reasons why like I love Star Trek Discovery so much. I think it does like a really incredible job of sort of encapsulating a lot of the conversations that we see happening in the world. And I wanted to ask y'all if there was any particular, and it can be outside of Star Trek, but any story that you might recommend that you think is pertinent to what's sort of going on right now, or something that you've really enjoyed lately.
I was motivated to watch Bar Association from Deep Space Nine again because of the writer's strike. And that, it's a great, honestly, rewatching it might have moved it into my top 5 Deep Space Nine episodes. It is such a great episode, but just this exploration of like labor laws and workforce and how that is like to watch people realize that like as workers they have rights and they do hold a position of power, even though we are taught that we don't. Like we're taught like we're not in charge. It's the term boss, right? They're in charge of us. And then realizing that we do have power to stand up to those bosses, and refusing to work is actually a very good way to show them how important we are to their business. And that if we don't work, if they don't treat us well, then their business falls. And that episode, I think, with Rom's sort of understanding of labor rights and how messy it can get with like he gets offered a bribe, right? Like Quark comes to him and he's like, I'm just gonna give you a ton of latinum if you make this go away. And then to have like Brunt FCA show up and like lean on Quark and like, and say like, look, you have your business, because then those bosses have bosses, right? And they're being told you need to squash this. Bar association. I mean, yeah, it's hard because it's not one of those stories that like needs the science fiction allegory in order to be told, right? It is a story that we can tell and we all relate to, but I think it's just it drives it home when it comes from left field, when you're like, oh yeah.
Well, that's what I like about Deep Space Nine specifically, and this would kind of get into my answer, but just focus on this one, is that like Deep Space Nine does such a good job of flipping Star Trek on its head in a ways that like I don't think like I'm writing a video now where I'm doing a deep dive on Deep Space Nine, and the thing that I talk about is like how much Deep Space Nine's flipped Star Trek on its head in a way that I don't think people really talk enough about yet. In that, like if you look at TNG, the way that TNG and a lot of other Star Treks work is they sort of otherize different cultures a lot of ways to be able to try to teach about them. So you get like episodes like the one I always go to, that's an easy one for me, is like The Outcast, which was an episode from TNG that was supposed to be about homosexuality, but kind of like weirdly backed into trans allegory because they thought, oh, non-binary aliens, what a crazy idea.
This can't exist.
Yeah, that's such a strange, wacky, weird
They
thing.
don't fit in the gender binary.
Yeah. Oh my god, what? But that episode was like very otherizing of like queer folks, non-binary folks generally, in a way that's meant to be sympathetic, but ultimately is otherizing. You see that going back to the original series too, when they did like the like half black on one side, half white on the other side, where it's like otherizing race relations. And a lot of times they can get things a lot wrong, like the power dynamics they got wrong in that episode in the original series. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. The Outcast has some stuff that I really like in terms of like getting its pronouns right, and like having pronouns discussions, things like that. But then it like accidentally says like, hey, queer conversion therapy is a thing that's possible in weird science fiction land, and it's like, that's not cool, Star Trek. But when you get to Deep Space Nine, it kind of reverses that, and it lets like the people who are othered get to tell stories about literal things. So you get like Cisco expressed like he is an outsider within Star Trek, literally telling Picard to go like f off in his in the first episode. And so he's like an outsider of the Star Trek world, but then he gets to talk about like being an outsider of Federation society and also being a black man and what it means to be a black man today, but also in relationship to where humanity has been in numerous ways and where it was at the time the show came out. And so you go to Bar Association. And what's so cool about that is it like you have these Ferengi characters who have been othered as like this like capitalist metaphor, and they get to learn about literal workers' rights issues, literally quoting Karl Marx in that episode. And it shows how they like can learn those things. I think that why that episode is so awesome is because it does sort of like, it's a good way to introduce people to exactly what you were saying, Erin. That's like how workers' rights work and how workers actually do have power, because that's a thing that, because we're all programmed in a capitalist world, put a coin in the jar for whenever I talk about capitalism. It's like it's
gonna be a hot topic tonight.
Exactly. We don't necessarily see all of that because it's so ingrained and indoctrinated in a lot of the ways the world tells us to think about capitalism. And so like that show, by taking the other and making it expressly like about the issues today, I think it like flips Star Trek in its head in a cool way. And that's why I'm writing about Deep Space Nine, and that would be my answer with Deep Space Nine. Just generally, I think the way that I'm writing about it, just from my perspective, is I think it's a very queer show, and not because there are a lot of queer characters in it, though you can read a lot of queerness into it, like Jadzia Dax being a trans character and numerous other things in that show. Changelings could also be read as like gender fluid in a lot of different ways, and in an interesting way that's complicated and sometimes problematic. But when I say it's queer, I think about like how things like fascism or things like that are very much about like how people are used. Sorry, I'll stop ranting. I rant a lot, so please shut me up.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'm here for it. No, and I agree with you. I think it's like one of the reasons why I think like Deep Space Nine, I think of a lot of the 90s era Trek as much as I am a Voyager girl. Like there's so much that holds up and I think is still applicable. And like, it's sad that so much history repeats itself that you're just like, dang, this is still so like on point to what is going on. And I think you're right, Jessie, in saying that like it was queer in its story approach in some ways, right? Because it is like allowing the folks who have so often been the people we're viewing to actually be like, oh, I'm going to flip this on you, and now you have to view how I'm viewing everything, right?
Exactly. It's about how the societies don't fit them, and so how do they make their own society, their own family, their own community outside of that, and actually prove that they're just as good, if not better, than the jerks over on the Enterprise D who get to be all perfect and run the flagship. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And we always have to remember that O'Brien is a union man. I've loved seeing all of the memes during the writer's strike.
Yeah, it's my sign. My sign is literally, if people have seen that floating around, you might not have been able to tell it was me, but I definitely have a sign that is a picture of Chief O'Brien, and it says he was more than a hero. He was a union man.
Yeah,
love
that.
Most important man in Starfleet.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason, I've been thinking a lot since like post Picard, and I'll put the asterisk of like, I of course enjoyed Picard for what Picard was, and like I had a great time. And the other thing is, someone who makes content, media, storytelling, like making anything right now is really freaking hard. I always like put that as my asterisk, is like, it's incredible that anything gets made at all, and it takes so many people. But I get sad when things like Discovery is only going to get one more season, and I'm like so excited to see what we're going to get this season with Strange New Worlds. I know we just got some preview images of our beloved lower deckers going for their crossover.
I'm so excited.
I'm just so excited. I love Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid. I like cannot wait to see them IRL in uniform and not just like on a con panel for funsies. But I think what has felt so lovely about a lot of the new Trek series has been like the actual representation of the folks that we have seen, right? Like we don't have to read as something as queer coded because they are just queer characters, and like seeing these folks in charge that we've not seen in charge in so long, or haven't had the same space taken up. And so I don't know, for me, things like Discovery are so important. And I think a lot of the like dialogue that we see online can feel kind of toxic. And I know, Jessie, you're very familiar with this. Also, y'all, Jessie has an incredible like 3+ hour breakdown of Picard that you should go watch.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of that. I had thoughts after that season. I just needed to write. So
yes. And I will just say like double tap, like, like I was like, yes, correct. Yes. I think it's been really refreshing. And I think sci-fi has been this space for so like folks often equate being someone who's like involved in Star Trek or into sci-fi is like, that's like an othering of a community, right? And so it's like, oh, the others finally get all of our others on TV, finally, right? So I just wanted to ask if there is any particular character from like the newer franchises that you've really connected with, and maybe Erin, if there's one that you really love getting to kind of incorporate into the plot lines that you get to work on.
I'll let Jessie go first.
Oh, well, I think there's two. The first and foremost one that resonates most with me is Tendi. Tendi is like, I adore her to death because she captures everything that I love about Star Trek. Is just like a single character where she is so earnestly like kind and excited and just wants to care about others, and yet if you do something wrong, she'll be the first one to like freak out and like just like no, not okay. And yet she's also like just very like excited, sometimes overly excited, and will want that for everybody. She wants like everyone to be as excited as she is and as happy as she is, in a way that's like brings them in, rather than is just like trying to force people to be that. Like there's been a few episodes where like sometimes she does try to force people to do that, and then she learns like, oh, that's not the thing. But no, she's always there to like show people how to see the brighter side of things. And I think that is just everything that I want to be as a person. And what I try to bring to the work that I do and the things that I make. So just like Tendi just resonates with me on every level, and like the entire Lower Decks cast just generally, like I adore, like easily my favorite modern Star Trek show. No shade at the other ones, I love them all, but that one just in particular just captures my heart in a particular way, and Tendi very specifically. And then another character, just to kind of jump off what we were talking about, and I'll keep this one quick, is Angel from Strange New Worlds.
Oh, yeah.
I want Angel back so badly.
Oh, I adore them so much because Angel is what I love Angel for is because they are a character that is earned in numerous ways. Not only are they fun and over the top and get to be villainous, but if I had saw that character appear in any other franchise like Star Wars or something, and I love Star Wars, but like they have not had a lot of queer representation. And so if they had like the first non-binary character they have is the over-the-top villainous camp villain, I would have been like, this is a bit stereotypical. And I love those characters. Like we stand and see camp villain, but it's like I want to see actual like good representation first. But what Star Trek has done a great job of doing is across all of its shows, especially Discovery, most and first and foremost, but all of them to a degree, is have such a wide plethora of queer characters. So that when we do have this one who gets to be the over-the-top camp villain, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is our one. It's like, oh, this is one of the spectrum of queer people. And I think that if you had that character in any other franchise, it would have been something I would have criticized. Whereas in this franchise, it's like, no, I just get to adore them and just love the crap out of their over-the-top villainous performance. And it was great. So I adore Angel so much.
And I think I'm so glad you said that because I saw in the chat, like people were asking about like, you know, beyond like Deep Space Nine, but thinking about modern Trek and how it reflects on our society. And I think with what's interesting is that like Discovery, it became non-coded. Like they just got to tell non-binary stories. They got to tell queer love stories. Like they got to have characters who just existed and they didn't have to be allegories and we didn't have to explore that. And then, like you said, to have a villain, whereas I think a perfect example is the Deep Space Nine Mirror universe, where it's like, ooh, evil Kira is gay.
Exactly.
I'd argue regular Kira probably is too.
Yes, but to have this like the way she was portrayed as this like super evil and also gay and gay equal evil and like the way that the mirror universe in Deep Space Nine was portrayed was not great, Bob. Like
I will say I do stand the Worf Garrick BDSM stuff going on there.
I am here for this.
Yeah, problematic too, but I'm here for it.
Also, I would argue Garrick in Prime Universe would be down for it.
Worf,
not so much, and that's more a reflection on it being Mirror Worf than suddenly gay Worf.
I think Prime Worf would be down for it. He just does not had it awakened in him. He is too vanilla, but you saw him with what's her face in TNG, his child's mother. You saw him with her. He's he's a boy who has not explored himself enough yet to know that he would be very much down for it. I'm sorry, this got
not to get more depressing, but I do feel if he had more time with Jadzia, then that would
we all remember the Ryza episode.
He was like, all right, honey, we're trying something different tonight. Get under our giant fur blanket that they have from that one episode, and we're doing some fun things.
Just ignore the things on the wall for right now. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, we'll get them later. Just we'll take it slow, honey.
We're baby stepping here. Yeah, 1,000%. But yeah, I mean, honestly though, like I do feel what's great is that modern Discovery has, or like modern Trek, but especially Discovery, has allowed those stories to just not be coded and they just exist. And then they can then tell the fun stories where, hell yeah, we're going to get a badass villain. And oh, by the way, they're also non-binary, but like the point is that we have a badass villain.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier, like the toxic people who are just like, Star Trek Discovery, SJW. It's like, no, I will fight to the death for Star Trek Discovery because I adore that show so much. It is messy sometimes. It is far from perfect, but I think it always did the work of like trying to do something new, try to do something different in a way that like boldly went, like Star Trek always should, and try to just do like, you know, Star Trek Picard season 3, you know, I have my thoughts on it. It's like, oh, the changelings are here. They're doing the same thing the changelings always do. The Borg are here. They're doing the same thing the Borg are always going to do. And it's like nice to remember Barry's moments, but ultimately like Discovery is the one that's like, yeah, we're gonna have weird aliens outside the universe who are like 10 feet tall and thousands of years old and like talk through emotion dust. Like, I mean, like, I love that crowd.
Why not? It's literally we're
Exactly.
making magic. We're making things that like use your imagination. It's so much more fun. And I always think of Discovery like as there's that meme on TikTok where it's just like she walked, she strutted her stuff on the runway, mama, so that Peppa could run. And I'm just like, this is so we can have everything else. Like
Exactly. And it does that with the non-coded character. Like, and I also love Discovery too, because like as you were saying, Aaron, it's like they get to be non-coded and yet they get to tell trans and queer and, you know, I can't speak for these communities, but I know like Black folks as well are like get to feel represented and getting to have numerous characters, different like people from different backgrounds, getting to see different characters on that show, and getting to see like an actual infinite diversity and infinite combinations, but also getting to like share stories. Like I know Ian Alexander's character getting to like actually mention being transitioning and being trans in not a way that's like, hi, I'm the trans one today, but offhandedly. But then also having stories that are about identity as well and about being seen in a metaphorical way. So it's literal representation, but also stories that resonate with us as well. And I think that's very wonderful and beautiful writing and exactly where Star Trek needs to go, which is why I love Discovery.
To what you were talking about the idea that like people's response, their visceral response to Star Trek Discovery, and how it has been maligned for actually having the exact same themes that we have seen. And I would argue, like, I love Burnham's journey to becoming her captain. Like, her journey to figure out who she is as a captain, I think is so well done. And I remember seeing where she finally had reached that point where it was like, I am a captain. This is how I do things. And she was Kirk. Like, she felt like Kirk, and her approach was like, I am off the cuff. I am like violence first. Like, I fight, I solve problems. I am loyal to my crew. I defer to the people who know more than me. Like, she is Kirk. And it is, and people refuse to even acknowledge her as a character and yet laud Kirk as this amazing captain. And I'm like, she has the exact same philosophy he does.
And it's the reason is, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with TNG. And this is like, I do a video about sex and sexuality and Star Trek, and I'm kind of building to this point over several videos, but it's like the reason that people reject characters like Burnham, but will accept characters like Kirk is because our society doesn't tell us to be able to identify with people who aren't the cis straight white dude. And that's not hating cis straight white dudes, but our society props that up as like the normal viewpoint that everyone should have. Like that's the like that's the
been fed for so
long.
It's
the objective one. It's that's normal, and everything is some version of abnormal. Whether people would say that, people will expressly say that when they're being bigoted, but whether they realize that or not, that's what our society implicitly tells us. So when people are forced to identify into a character that is different from them, especially people who have never been asked to identify with someone different from them, because, you know, many men aren't asked to identify into other characters because their stories haven't been told that way, they kind of get uncomfortable and don't wish to see the nuances of experience or who that is. And so they get uncomfortable, and instead of self-analyzing that uncomfort, they put it back on the thing that's making them uncomfortable and say, well, this is making me feel uncomfortable, so it must be something wrong with this. And then they'll find reasons to hate the thing that isn't the thing that they want to say, which is like, I can't identify with this queer person, this Black person, this whatever. So it's like, oh, there's too much explosions, or there's da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they'll nitpick it all to hell. But then when you look at Star Trek Picard season 3, they get to have that type of character that they can identify into. They're like their Jack Crushers and their Picards, and then they'll ignore the same exact what they considered problems that were in Star Trek Discovery that are also in Picard. And I'm not even saying they're the problems. There's some things that they call out as like problems that I don't care about or I like. But then they'll be like, yeah, this is great and perfect and the best show ever. It's like, but the problems that you were calling and nitpicking Star Trek Discovery for are still here. But the reason you're not noticing it is because you're not feeling discomfort, because the show's not forcing you to see something from a new perspective. And that's why they don't nitpick it all to hell.
I think too, it's interesting, like a lot of new Trek, and it's something that I've enjoyed, is like, instead of seeing like these captains as fully formed captains, we're often watching people grow along the entire series, right? And it's also we don't have 22, 24 episode orders anymore. And so it's like, how are we fitting all of this character development in? And it's like, the show has to be the character development. So it's like, we can't just jump in and be like, here's this confident, fully formed captain. Like, watching Burnham's journey has been like one of my favorite things, is to see those ups and downs. And we're finally going to see this fully formed captain here. I think we've seen for a while now, but we've gotten to go along the journey instead of these like flashback moments where we see like some more insights or the backstories that come later. And I think too, that's one of the reasons why I also love Lower Decks. It's like, oh, I am also a person who's not a fully formed human yet, who has not figured out everything there is to know. So it's like nice to watch something where you're like, oh, like, I am for sure a mariner in lots of situations where I go in with way too much confidence, and I'm going to probably get a little burned, and a little bit of that chaotic bisexual energy. And then if you added just like a dash of Tilly, you've got Myrriah, you know, like, and I'm just like, oh, these are my people.
And something too that you just reminded me of, the reason I also love Lower Decks, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Bar Association, is it's the like lower level, like it's the work, like the working
them
class
working in buffer time, because
yeah,
like,
that was the exact episode. Like the people at the top being like, you need to work buffer time, you need to move, and not understanding its effects. And thankfully, in a Star Trek world, people, Starfleet people go like, oh yeah, maybe that was actually a terrible thing. Actually, we won't do it. We'll listen to Boimler. But like that is what that's about. That if you're looking for like a political Star Trek story, like Temporal Edict, I think is very clearly one that like is a kind of workers' rights story, but told within a Star Trek framework that is like not as expressly didactic as like Bar Association is, where it's quoting Karl Marx, but it is that story. So
yeah.
And I think, you know, it's interesting too, thinking about with the strike of it all. You know, we see like the dangers of AI because things like peanut hamper can happen. So I don't know.
Peanut hamper time.
I don't know if y'all are aware, but somehow I managed to throw peanut hamper in every episode of this podcast. And peanut hamper has come into existence.
I love peanut hamper.
I love peanut hamper, and also technically. Isn't Peanut Hamper No, she is an AI. Everything else is a virtual intelligence. This is the distinction.
So sorry, I had to get Peanut Hamper in.
Peanut Hamper is great.
I love it.
I wanted to go back. Someone in the chat asked about time crystals, and with Strange New Worlds coming up, and there's the idea of free will and determinism. And I don't know if y'all are. I've been watching that series on Apple TV, the Big Door Prize. I don't know if y'all have checked that one out, but it's in synopsis, it's like there's this machine that's essentially telling people what their like potential is, and so they get these cards with just like one word on them. So like one woman gets royalty, like another gets but other people get like liar or hero. And it's this I've really enjoyed the show so far, but it kind of reminds me of this conversation of the idea of free will and determinism, especially within Star Trek, of just like, if you know your future or your potential, right, how does that alter the way that you get there? And I always think that's such an interesting thing, going back into Strange New Worlds with Pike's character and how he's going to act going through into the future.
Question before we move on and actually answer your question: is Big Door Prize, is that nonfiction or fiction? Sorry, I haven't heard about it. It sounds amazing. Like, is it?
It's based off a sci-fi book. Yeah. So.
Oh, so it is like it's fictional. Yeah. It's a fictional narrative.
Fictional, okay. Yeah.
It could totally also be
like a science experiment. You're getting like, this is your potential.
Yeah. So anyway, whether it was real or not, like, yeah, I was just curious. Anyway, yeah, it sounds amazing. But I think, because I'll hand it over to Jessie, because I can't say too much, obviously, about the future of Strange New Worlds. But I mean, oh God, I love Strange New Worlds. I'm so proud to be a part of that show. I think it's like all of these, but like honestly, Strange New Worlds is so good. And their finale of season 1, I feel like did one of the best jobs about addressing the idea of predeterminism and how someone handles that and the effect that can have on their psyche, but also the timeline. So like in a science fiction way, it was exploring like, okay, you have a chance, like you can see where this goes if you mess with the timeline, but also like let it be. you know, like at some point you're just gonna have to like not, because the events that kicked off that episode was that he was actively trying to change the timeline. He was trying to write to this kid and tell them not to join Starfleet. And so the lesson he learned was just don't try to change anything. Like, it's going to happen and you have to accept that. And I just thought, I love that. I love that episode. I love that. Sorry, while I have the pulpit,
Yes.
the reason I love that episode so much is because people who have never seen the original series and never saw Balance of Terror watch it, and they think Kirk doesn't know what he's doing. And people who have seen the original series are coming in and going like, oh, Pike is like not the right person for this. Like, Pike is screwing this up every step of the way. And so the viewer experience for that is still fulfilled. Like, people don't feel like they're missing out on anything when they watch it, but it's different depending on what your experience of Star Trek is. And I just, such a good episode. So good. All right.
That episode is, I adore that episode too. I was like nerding the hell out as soon as I saw what that was. I was like, oh my god, this is what they're doing. I loved it. Well, I always love predeterminism stories that and I'll share two that I think you should, if both of you should check out, because they're two of my favorite things that I've seen, and they're about free will and determinism. But I always love free will and determinism stories that kind of end on this thing of like, even if you know your future, it's kind of goes to who you are as a person. And it kind of is like this conversation we have about free will in general, right? It's like, we might ultimately not have free will because everything has an equal and opposite reaction, and we're all just the you know, things from before us influencing what we're doing now. And so the choices that I made were just things that like that's the end point of just things that have happened throughout all the universe to bring me to this point. But at the end of the day, we have to act as if we have free will, because what does it matter otherwise? Like, we could get caught up in just being like, oh, I don't have free will. Nothing that I do matters. Or you just like have to live your life and go about what you're going to do anyways, because that's the way we have to exist. And so I always like stories about free will and determinism that kind of end on that point, which is what the Pike story ultimately is like, this is what you're going to do, not because you know what's going to happen, but because of who you are inherently. And it's just, you know that this is the choice that you're going to make because it's the right choice to make for who you are. And for Pike specifically, is the right choice overall morally as well. And so I think I really do like stories about free will. It just sort of comes down like, maybe we don't, but at the end of the day, it's about who you are, and this is what you're going to do anyways. And I really think though that's the theme that resonates the most whenever you tell those stories. And I'll end on recommending, if you want the best free will determinism stories I've ever seen that will like hurt your brain a lot. Have either of you seen Devs or Dark?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Devs.
Yes.
I haven't seen Devs, but I've seen Dark.
Okay,
And
Dark.
yes,
Yeah,
my list.
Dark. I'll just, for listeners, if you haven't seen Dark, Dark is a time travel show that will like bring a notepad, because it hurts your brain,
Get
but
your
it is
timeline's ready.
exactly. It is a great show. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it is a time travel show where different things happening at different times happen concurrently. So like when people go back in time, like the timelines of all three times move forward at the same moment. And what I love about that show in particular is there are times where you'll see characters in the future of their time. Like you'll see a character in the past, like a past self and a future self of a character. And you'll sit there and go, why does they have completely different worldviews? And why would like the older one be fighting against his younger self if he knows that that's what's going to happen anyways? Because everything in the show is already determined. It's nothing like breaks the rules of it. It's all like set in stone, sort of things. And then you get to certain moments where the characters' ideologies do change, like moments where they have a big cathartic moment that like changes their point of view, and you're like, oh, I get it. I get why they now act like that in the future, even though they know this past stuff. And it just works so well. And the characterization is so well done, despite the complexities of the time travel. It's so good. And then Devs is a show that I adore as well. It's a mini series about, basically and you'll know the quantum physics more than I will, Erin. But it's a show about like the idea of, God, I did a whole video on it and now I can't remember it, but it's basically they make a machine using quantum mechanics that can kind of like see the future, and like determine what the future is going to be. But it's based off of like the idea of in quantum mechanics where like it's one thing or the other, and you can kind of like it's like best guess technically. Again, I did a thing on it, but I can't remember. You'll know better than I will. But it ties in all of that into ideas. This Mark Zuckerberg type of character makes a machine that can see the future slightly, and he sort of like gets stuck in it because he wants to try and create like his own sort of like way the world works, but he gets kind of stuck in how it's supposed to be. I need to go back and remember how to talk about it because it was a great show, but it's wonderful. Yeah,
need to watch that. And also I would plug Foundation on Apple TV Plus, because that was based on an Asimov thing, but the idea of a society that's able to mathematically predict what their future is going to be, and then what happens when parameters enter that disrupt that plan. High recommend.
I like that show. I have some criticisms of it. Just Right did a great video series about why it sometimes messes with its own message, but
we could do a whole ass conversation, but we're here for Star Trek, Myrriah.
Yes. Yeah, we are.
No, it's off season. We can do whatever we want, y'all. We have no current show to talk about. And this feeds into it well. Besides revisiting Star Trek and some of these other series, is there anything that you're watching or listening to right now that you are really enjoying?
What am I watching now? I look.
I keep like, where's my note? Yeah, where's my notepad? Okay.
I was like, it's Drag Race season for me right now. We have All Stars on.
Nice.
Who I know we have some great Drag Race alumni who do some incredible cosplay that I always love seeing. Jackie Cox does a great job.
Sorry, you just said nothing.
We love Jackie. We
very much love Jackie, and that's what I'll say right now.
I'm watching Ted Lasso, obviously, and Succession and Yellow Jackets. Succession last week.
Oh yeah, Succession. Secession, I was going to mention Secession. Secession is such a good show at understanding how like being rich makes you completely miserable, and like understands the dynamics of how like being rich is actually like a health problem in a very real way of like they just aren't able to have actual human connection with anybody, and it messes them up.
Yeah, and then also how much power they actually have over everyone else.
Exactly,
and how we are all just pawns.
Yeah, how their petty squabbles like have huge ramifications. Yeah,
I still haven't watched Succession yet. I watched the first episode and I couldn't get into it, but I might have just had I just come off of White Lotus, and I think I was just like too many rich white people.
Yeah, fair.
But I was gonna recommend. I don't know if y'all listened to this podcast. It's from the CBC. It's called Let's Make a Sci-Fi. The first season was Let's Make a Rom-Com, and so or maybe I have that flipped around. They've done 2 seasons. It's creators who are given a task, and they record the whole process of them coming up and scripting and like trying to create a rom-com and a sci-fi, and it's really fun. It's really fun.
Nice.
So I thought you all might enjoy that. Which then segues. I can talk. All right. Into my last point is y'all are working on a short film together. What can you share with us? What can we promote? How can people help? What's going on?
Yeah. Erin, do you want to start? Yeah.
No.
Do you want me to go?
So yeah, I would say go for it. Go for it.
So do you want me to say the thing?
I say go for it.
Okay.
It's so close.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll save that for the end then. But since it was already mentioned, yeah, I'll save it for. I'll go through the spiel and then I'll
air of mystery.
You're going to get an exclusive by like 12 hours because we're technically announcing it tomorrow. But anyways, yes, we are working on a short film called Identities. It is a script that I wrote and I'm directing. And Erin is producing, and she's freaking killing it. By the way, it's been honestly kind of like a dream to work with Erin because she's just so good at like doing all the things, like connecting me with like amazing people. Like we've had meetings the past few weeks with like our full production team, like, and it's just been so cool to see this like team of people coming together that Erin's like really helped and like spearheaded and getting everything done, doing all the stuff. It's honestly been a dream come true. And I'm very ecstatic about it, especially because we're trying to make it very, very queer and diverse, behind the camera and in front of the camera as well. And it's just nice to like be able to just be part of that and like get to make something just really cool with cool people. And the since we've kind of been like touching on weird like adjacent themes to it, it's almost as if it's in my brain a lot in terms of our conversations, because the film is about a near future where everyone is sort of has to work in an online digital metaverse, where everyone has to have basically these avatars that you go to work with. And it's about how do people who are forced to present and exist a certain way, who aren't actually that in real life, how do they find and express and understand themselves? It's basically sort of asking the question, how do you define yourselves when you're forced to live in a world of someone else's limited imagination of what humanity can be? And there's hopefully some cool twists and turns, and it's very, very queer, but in a way that kind of what we were talking about with Deep Space Nine, in that it's not like the story is expressly and literally queer with queer characters, but I also hope the themes sort of touch upon how everyone feels this way in our society today. That's sort of forcing us all to try to be a certain way for, you name it, capitalism, the world we live in right now, that doesn't allow us to be seen as our full selves, but how we're supposed to function for the job, the state, the government, and so I hope that's what the story is about, but in a joyous way. That's ultimately triumphant about like, this is the beauty and amazingness that humanity is in its totality. So I'm very excited to be telling that story and to tell it with everyone. We've already announced an amazing cast of people. We have a few more people that we have not announced yet, but we have people like Jessica Nicole, if you're a huge Fringe fan, she's from that. We've announced Maggie Mae Fish here on YouTube. I'm sure I'm going to miss someone, so apologies, but they're all a fantastic, fantastic, beautiful, amazing cast. Beautiful inside and out. They're all gorgeous, wonderful people. But since you mentioned her earlier, I can announce, because we're announcing her tomorrow, is Jackie Cox is going to be playing a character in the show, or in the film, I should say. So yeah, Jackie Cox is officially joining our cast, and she's amazing. So yeah,
we're so excited, and we've been so honored, like across the board, of people who have read Jessie's amazing script and just been like, I want to be a part of this. This sounds amazing. Like, it feels so relevant. It feels so pertinent to the conversations that we have in our society about how we interact in a world that is forged by cis white straight men, and what limitations that gives us when they are literally forming the worlds that we live in. And I think it's so relevant, and it's just been so touching to see so many incredible actors across the board just be like, hell yeah, I want to be part of this project. And I'm Jackie on top of it. I'm so excited about. So that's your exclusive, Myrriah.
Well, as a gigantic Drag Race fan and drag fan, this is a perfect crossover episode and podcast to do it on.
I love it.
I should also say, because they'll probably yell at me if I don't mention it, but if you want to support us doing it, by the way, the film is being funded and distributed by Nebula, which is a streaming service that I'm a part of. They support me as a YouTuber. You can go on there and get like bonus YouTube content and things like that from not just myself, but a bunch of other wonderful, amazing, and very diverse creators as well on their platform. And they are absolutely amazing in like supporting us. Like, Erin has meetings with them every week, and she comes back to me, is like, yeah, they had all these cool like things, and like they're not dictating anything that we get to do, but they are always like yes-anding in a really wonderful way. So yeah, if you want to support the project, go sign up for Nebula, preferably with the Identities link. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you search for Identities in Nebula, or you look up Jessie on Nebula, you'll get a discount. I think a discount.
Yeah, you get a discount. Here,
Yeah.
I was like, if you put it,
I'll get the actual information.
Can we put it? Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah,
anyway.
If you put it in the private chat, I can post it in the regular chat, and I'll also put it in the notes for the podcast.
And yeah, I mean, honestly, Nebula has been fantastic, and for them to support this is one of the first big like narrative projects they've done. But they also did a great what was it, a theatrical filming of The Prince by
Mhm.
Abigail Thorne from Philosophy Tube, which was like a queer trans story about Shakespeare. And
It's a
like,
Shakespeare multiverse trans queer story. Yeah.
I
like
mean,
sign me
Crazy.
up, right?
Yeah.
And so
sounds
their
great.
support of these types of stories to be told has just been fantastic. And we're so excited. So we're filming in August.
Mhm.
And then if you sign up through Nebula, you'll get some behind the scenes updates as we go up to and through the filming. And then the whole film will be on Nebula
Soonish. The goal is probably
next year.
yeah, my guess is the film will be said and done by the end of the year, and then probably on Nebula sometime early next year would probably be the best guess at the moment. So.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we'll have to have you back definitely to come and talk about it once it's out, but hopefully again before that too.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you all would like to promote? And I'm going to put this link in the chat while y'all
Yeah, I
do
just
that.
copied and pasted the
Perfect.
like the promotional stuff that they send me. So
Great.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I think I wanted to mention that we didn't really get a chance to talk about was just Star Trek Prodigy. I don't
yes.
think a lot of people have had a chance to really watch it. I appreciate that the first two-parter episode feels very like another Star franchise, and I feel like that was intentional. I don't know if that was or not, but to draw kids in who have been watching that other franchise, and then it just backhands you in episode 3 and is like, nope, Star Trek.
was it you that told me that was like the best way to describe it was either you or someone who's like the best way to describe Prodigy is Star Wars characters learning how to do Star Trek.
Someone else told me and I told you.
Yes,
so
that's what it was.
That is a really good description. Yeah.
That is the best description. And the characters are so wonderful and near and dear to my heart. And all 20 episodes of season 1 are available. And I highly recommend you share that with, especially kids. I would say probably 8 to 12 who have a love for science and may connect with some of the characters in that. So I just have to plug that as well.
As a fully grown human, though a child at heart, I will say I also adore it. And legitimately, I always say like I think the like animated sides of every franchise are kind of where like the franchise is like kind of like keep fanning the flames, even when like live action stuff sometimes can be like mixed or like be weird or whatever. Like I always feel like look at Star Wars. So much of what they're doing in live action now is like what they were doing in the Clone Wars, like Ahsoka and all that jazz,
based on the animated stuff.
Yeah. So like Prodigy and Lower Decks, but Prodigy especially too is just like I think where like a lot of like the coolest and most interesting and most like strangest stuff is happening in Star Trek, and I adore that show as well. Like Rock Talk is an absolute joy. Yeah.
My heart.
We love her.
Yeah, I was like, all of the characters are a delight. The voice actors do an incredible job. It's so much fun. Who doesn't want Murph in their life? Come on now, you got to have some Murph time.
Who doesn't want Murph?
Oh my god, I'm just loving Murph. Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's just such a beautifully made show. Like the background, all of the animation, all the designs and of the characters and the backgrounds are beautiful. So,
and I think
Janeway.
Last thing. And Janeway, obviously.
Yeah.
Last thing I will say is watch Strange New Worlds June 15th, and also support your writers who write all of this awesome stuff, who are currently on strike, trying to get better deals. I have seen the system degrade over the last 5 years. It is important. It is crucial. We want living wages. And if you want good content, support the people who make it. There are many resources. I think people can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Erin Mac. I'm retweeting a lot of ways that people can support the strike, especially if you're not in LA. And if you are in LA or New York or Chicago or Atlanta, I think there's a bunch of stuff. Look it up. You can go to the picket line. It's okay if you're not a TV writer. You can go and support, and they would love to have you. There's no worries at all. So
it's a great time. I went today to the picket line at Netflix. It was lovely as someone who just works in periphery industries, and everyone was so happy and delighted to have extra bodies. I got my way over my 10,000 steps in. So wear comfortable shoes. But yeah, it was you're there in solidarity. So obviously there's messaging to learn and make sure you're asking the captains who are there for what they're fighting for. So if anyone asks you questions, make sure you're directing it to all the right people, because they want to make sure all the correct messaging is getting out. So, but yeah, going to the picket line is a great way to show solidarity if you can. Jessie, anything else? You have an incredible YouTube channel.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to echo first, like, again, support the writers. They're amazing. I'm trying to get some writers on my channel to be able to talk about the strike, but they're super busy, understandably so. So, well, hopefully that'll happen, but I will also try and be on the picket line when I come down to LA. So that'll also be great. So yeah, support the writers. But yeah, no, if you want to support me, you can, again, sign up at Nebula is probably like the most direct thing if you want to, put money towards supporting me and this project that we're doing. But also beyond that, I have a channel called Jessie Gender, where I do sort of video essay type of stuff. Generally try to talk about like social and political issues through nerddoms and geekdoms, but just because the way the world is at the moment, I also talk very expressly and openly about like trans and LGBTQ issues, just because that's kind of necessary given the state of trans rights and LGBTQ rights generally right now. So I try to write a bunch of those things that I hope are very emotional and moving and also and educational. But also then I just try and be a weird nerd. So if you like any of that sounds appealing to you, go subscribe to Jessie Gender. So
please do. Thank you both so much again for being with us tonight. I so appreciate your time. I'm so excited for the short film. I cannot wait to watch it. I'll be signing up for Nebula once I get my next paycheck. And
hell yeah.
It'll be very exciting. Thank you all to everyone who joined us in the live chat. We appreciate you so much for all of your questions and kind words. We will be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. I haven't decided what we're doing yet, but we'll be doing something fun as we're preparing for Strange New Worlds. And then we will be back to our week-to-week content. Until next time, y'all, live long and prosper. Bye-bye.